Hi, it's Carrie from Flowers for Dreams. Thanks for joining us for another floral design session here in our studio. Today we'll be using a lot of lovely fall themed flowers. It's kind of the last of the autumnal season. We're moving into the holidays pretty soon, so we really want to enjoy all these fall colors while we have them. So I'm going to introduce you to some of our stems today. These are the spray roses, gorgeous, luscious orange color. Again, just kind of living in that fall moment while we can. We have some assorted grasses. Now this is a fresh millet. So your grass may look a little bit different than mine. That's okay. And you could even pull some grass from an obliging field if you were so inclined, if you want to add something later to your arrangement. We've got the Safari Sunset Leucadendron, beautiful burgundy color. Let me show you this one. They sometimes go from green to this deep burgundy color, and as they dry, they'll sort of open up into a flower shape. And you'll often get this really pretty shape of that star with that little center foliage. These grow in places like Australia, and I can never decide whether it's a foliage or a flower, but it'll probably be one of those ones that is the last man standing in your design. We've also got some dried pods. Very of the moment. This is a monkey pod. I'll show you a different one too. That's one of my favorites. This is a palm cap. And these are natural pods that have been dried and picked onto these wooden stems. And the wood can be a little tricky to cut, so make sure you're using a really sharp pair of clippers. I'm using these Felcos. They're a little bit more expensive than your standard pair of clippers, but they come apart. You can sharpen them. So if you do love to work with flowers, I'd recommend investing in a really good sharp pair of clippers to work with when you're designing. Your arrangements will last longer with a sharper cut, and you could always use them out in the garden. Or if you're like me, if you're a forager like me and you will go pick things on the side of the road. Our focal flower today is this gorgeous sunflower. I'm loving this brown center and that deep black eye of the sunflower. Really excited about this one today. Typically sunflowers are in season during the summertime. So this is kind of the tail end of their season, but they do feel quite harvesty, don't they? So I want to kind of enjoy that moment. We've also got this beautiful Nandina foliage. Here's a piece here. It's got, typically the natural shape is this sort of thick woody stem. Also can be quite hard to cut, so sharp pair of clippers will really help here. And it grows with this thick woody stem, some branches. Mine doesn't really have too much on the base here, but if you have a really large piece, you may just want to pull those pieces off of the side to make it a little bit easier to work with. And if you're lucky, you may have gotten some berries. That's a really fun addition to our arrangement, and a lot of times our Nandina will have these lovely red tips. Mine is mostly green, but you can kind of see it's just starting to inch into red. So if you've got a really red piece, they'll have this gorgeous ombre green into red color. Okay, so I'm using a different style of vase this week, and it's a compote vase, which means it's got this little foot to it. I've filled it up with water. This has a bit of a wider mouth, which means I'm gonna need more flowers to fill up my vase. So if you are designing in a mason jar, that'll have a little bit of a smaller mouth which is slightly easier, but it can be kind of fun to switch it up. But if you're ever choosing your vase size, just remember the smaller the mouth, the less you'll need to fill. So a little bud vase with about that size is gonna fill up quicker than something with a really large mouth. And if you're new to design, it may help to put a little bit of chicken wire in the base of your arrangement. You don't want to do that if you're using a clear vase, of course, because you'll see it. But if you're using something like I am, that's ceramic, that's got a wide mouth, that chicken wire will really help support everything and hold it up. It's not necessary. I'll show you today how to use our salal foliage, this guy, as our base. The stems will start to interlock, but if you ever want a little bit more support, chicken wire is available at craft stores. It's really, really easy to use. Okay, let's start with our base. Again, if you're using our mason jar, this technique will be just the same, but you're probably gonna need a little bit less to fill out your vase. My first step is to create a really beautiful base of foliage. So first, pull out your salal. Just pick through every piece. I like to measure by holding up the stem. Nice angled cut. And we'll add that one stem at a time to the vase till it's a little bit more full. So if you are finding that the foliage feels a little floppy, maybe it's not staying in your vase, you're gonna wanna clip it just a little bit shorter. Add a shorter piece in here till you've got this really lush feeling low, and then we can start adding some of our taller pieces. Conversely, you may have a really hefty piece of Nandina, so just let me show you an alternate method. You could also start with your Nandina if you've got a really cylindrical, pretty top piece, and start with that as your base and add in a couple more pieces, and that'll preserve pieces of salal, the natural shape of your stems, which is always a fun way to play with flowers, by using the natural shapes, doing less cuts. So I'm just going to fill in here my Nandina foliage with a little bit of salal. So turn it around on all sides, check out every side, make sure there's a little action on every side. I think I'm going to add just a little more salal, and then I still have a couple shorter pieces of Nandina that I pulled off of the side of the branch. So if you're like, man, I really have no idea how to attack this stem, you can always just pull them off piece by piece until you get these shorter pieces. And then you just want to pull off most of the foliage. Of course, anything going below the waterline is gonna need to be removed. Fresh cut. And then I'll just sort of add these into my arrangement. 45-degree insertion angle. So here's kind of what my vase looks like so far. Really loose and wild. Got a little bit of a hole here. So we'll add one more piece of salal right at the base. All right, that's coming along. But next, let's add our leucadendron pieces. So take a look at your stems. You should have 2 of these, and it's got a pretty long stem. So because of this reason, if I were to put it in just like this, it might be a little bit tall. So I'm just gonna pull off like a third of those leaves and then add this in. And I'm using the top of my foliage as my guide for kind of how tall got that first piece in. Since we have 2 of these, I may play with one being a little bit taller to sort of accentuate this lovely long side. It's got that Nandina piece. I always like to say you can always take off a little more height, but you can't add more height. So if you're ever wondering, you can always take off more. It's harder. Of course, you can't add more height back on. So I've got my base, I've got my leucadendron, which is sort of like a foliage, almost like a flower in there. And now I think I'm gonna add my pod next. Now we'll add this pretty low. I've got a big pod and it's gonna draw your eye around the arrangement. So I'm just gonna kind of tuck it a little bit lower, and then I'll probably fill in this little area here. And then I think I'll leave a space for my sunflowers, but next we'll add these beautiful orange spray roses. Now let's talk about spray roses. So they have multiple heads on them, and you can tell a spray rose from a regular rose because it's got these little tiny, again, tiny multiple heads, where a regular rose will just be one big, large head. You really get a good bang for your floral buck here with these spray roses. First step, pull off those side leaves. You can leave a couple pieces of the foliage at the top if it looks really pretty, but check for these, this little guy. Typically, you'll wanna trim that off so there's no ugly bare stem there. And then take a look at the outside of the petal. So I usually just go in and automatically pull off the outer petals of the rose. These are in great shape, so they don't really need it, but that just cleans up any bruising that might happen from the transport process. And then we can add these on the side and front. Take a little more off. Get that down kind of lower. All right, there we go. Same thing with this other rose. These little guys won't open. If you get a little bud that hasn't opened yet, probably will not open. Leaving some room for your spray roses to open up, because they will open up throughout the life of your arrangement. So I've made a little sort of triangle playing against these beautiful leucadendron pods. And now can put the finishing touches. Still have to do our grasses, but I'm gonna move on to our focal flower first. Ooh, look at that, beautiful. I like to pull off these larger foliage pieces because I don't think they really do much for the aesthetics of the arrangement. Just gonna drink up water, but maybe compare the size. I personally love when I get a little wee baby size sunflower, and maybe one that's a little bit bigger, because I like to have that kind of juxtaposition. Wherever you put your sunflower, kind of should be the star of the show. All right, so I'm gonna put my big guy really low in the arrangement, face that center piece out, and then my taller piece maybe up here. Sunflowers sometimes will have a challenging angle to their heads, so you may need to sort of play with it to get the perfect positioning. I'm having a little trouble getting my stems in there now because I've got a pretty small base. All right. Now we can add our grasses. These little babies sort of have a little outer layer. I saved them for last because they tend to be more delicate. You can kind of see I just snapped one of these. We'll give that a cut. But usually like to save our more delicate stems for last. But I'm gonna leave a couple because I think they feel so fun, harvesty. And I'll just let them kind of splay out on the side here to give some visual interest. One more piece. And voila! There is our beautiful harvest style arrangement. I did mine in a compote. There's a better view. You can do yours in a mason jar. I hope you had fun this week. Can't wait to see you next week when we'll be designing together again. Bye.